Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of Corporate Governance and Audit Committee. My name is Councillor Mahaley France-Meir, and I'm Chair of Corporate Governance and Audit. Today's meeting is being live streamed on the Council's website so the public can view without being in person and needing to be present. I'm going to invite members and officers to introduce themselves, and please remember to switch off your microphones as we go along. Thank you.
Morning everyone, Jonathan Foster, Senior Head of Audit, Corporate Governance and Insurance.
Good morning everyone, my name is Liz Gott. My role is that of Corporate Governance Manager. Thank you.
Morning, Councillor Dowson, Chapel Allerton Ward.
Morning, Councillor John Garvani, Horsforth Ward.
Morning, Hannah Bithell, Kirkstall Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Sonia Layton, Guiseley and Rawdon Ward.
Morning everyone, Rebecca Roberts, Legal Officer.
Morning, Julia Brannan, Internal Audit Manager.
Good morning everyone, Ryan Glennon, Senior Audit Manager.
Morning all, Brenda McLaughlin, Senior Audit Manager.
Morning, Angela Laycock, Head of Finance Internal Audit.
Good morning, Emma Camillo-Price, Intelligence and Policy Service.
Morning, David Halligan, Chief Technology Officer in IDS, covering for Andrew Byram.
And good morning, Phil Evans, Deputy Director of Resources and Transformation in the Children's and Families Directorate.
Morning everyone, Chris Rowlands, Head of Finance, Corporate Financial Management.
And Mary Hasnip, also Head of Finance in Corporate Financial Management.
Good morning everyone, I'm Richard Ellis, Deputy Chief Officer for Financial Services.
Morning everyone, Victoria Bradshaw, Assistant Chief Exec for Finance, Traded and Resources.
Good morning everybody, Perminder Sethi, Grant Forms and External Audit.
Good morning, Linda Wild, Independent Member.
Good morning everyone, Councillor Andrew Carter, Carvely and Farsley Ward.
Good morning everybody, Councillor Chesterfield for Middleton Park Ward.
Good morning, Debbie Oldham and I'm the clerk.
Right, good morning everyone. Moving on to item agenda 1, please, Debbie.
I'll run through all 1 to 5 if that's okay, Chair. So under agenda item 1 there are no appeals. Under agenda item 2 there's no exempt items. Under agenda item 3 there's no late items. Under agenda item 4, do members have any declarations of interest? I'll take silence as there are none. Under agenda item 5, apologies have been received from Councillor Robinson and Councillor Carter is attending as his substitute today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. For those of us that were on the committee on the 31st of March, are the minutes recorded correct that are held? Yep, thank you very much. Any matters arising?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, from March's meeting, there were a couple of items that arose. There was a question from Linda regarding the recording of non-financial risks within the audit plan. They will be included in the update that you'll receive in a couple of items' time. And there was also an appetite from members for an insurance report to be received regarding the use of artificial intelligence within the council. I have liaised with Andrew Byram, the Chief Officer of IDS, and that will be included within the annual assurance report received later on this year. I think it's around February next year that it will be received. Thank you.
Thank you. Are members happy with that? Yep. Okay, thank you very much. We're going to move on to item agenda 8, which is the internal audit update report. Angela?
Thank you, Chair. This is our regular update report that provides committee with a summary of the work that we've completed since our last update report in February and our priorities for subsequent periods. It also includes a summary of our activities that provide assurance on the performance and quality of our work. The things to note in our report this time round is in our previous report in February we had included a review of retail stock management. Following discussions with the head of service, we've removed that from our current audit plan. We obtained information on the existing controls in place, and it determined that this is no longer a high priority at this time. As you can appreciate, stock management does continue to be an area of concern, and we have picked that up through a high value assets review in highways, and we'll also consider what policies we might need from a commercial perspective as part of our review of financial policies. One thing to note, our priorities for the next period, we've included a review in Children's and Families on the Dedicated Schools Grant Management Action Plan. We know that this is an area of work that needs to be progressed, and we're going to work with Children's and Families on how we best support them in ensuring that plan is in place and is monitored to ensure that we achieve the actions that are included in that. The report includes the links to the insurance themes that we have to ensure that we get the breadth of coverage that we need for our annual opinion. And you'll see that we've also included additional information in our report around the risk areas, particularly in relation to where the risks aren't directly linked to internal audit reviews and how we gain assurance in those areas. One of the things to note is that we are going to contribute to a task and finish group that's being led by Intelligence and Performance, specifically Tim Rollett, who was the risk manager, which will review and determine the optimal risk assurance arrangements for the council. So we will report back on that. It's also included as part of our quality assurance improvement programme. In relation to recommendation tracking, we've raised 65 recommendations in the period and closed 67. So there's 69 open as at June. 62% of those aren't due yet, and that is a reflection of the fact that the services need time to implement the recommendations that we've raised. There are currently 2 recommendations that are between 6 and 12 months overdue, and the root cause for this really is it continues to be the limitation of resources to fully implement the recommendations. Full details of what those recommendations are included in the report. But the committee will note that following the assurances from Children's and Families in the meeting in February around the overdue recommendations that they had, we've received assurances that those outstanding recommendations have been closed, and a number of those will be followed up as part of our follow-up work. In relation to our overall performance, we continue to receive good feedback. In all cases, we've received agree or strongly agree on the questions included in our customer satisfaction questionnaire that's sent out at the end of every piece of work. And we continue to progress our SWOT actions from the exercise we undertook last year. In this period, we've developed our internal audit strategy and had input from key stakeholders on that, and we've updated our charter. Both of these will be brought to committee in the next meeting in July. Our focus for the next period in relation to those actions is to continue reviewing our processes and our templates, and also to undertake a skills gap analysis and develop a competency framework to have a more formalised approach to ongoing staff development and succession planning. We've also included the Monitoring of Urgent Decisions report. The details are in the report, but there's nothing that raises concerns, and where there have been uses of exemptions, they're all detailed in the report, and there's nothing to raise concerns over. So, any questions?
Thank you very much. I have one question. With the outstanding recommendations, on that basis, what assurances can be given that the savings within Children's and Families can take place?
Thank you, Chair. So first of all, probably to say that the Directorate really does value the work close. Is that any better? Okay, I'm never accused of being quiet, so it's a slight surprise for me. So firstly, probably helpful to say that the Directorate really values the close working relationship we have with colleagues in audit, and we do view the work that we undertake to be very much a partnership approach. I know that there have been some issues in relation to closing down recommendations. Want to assure members that work continues in terms of being able to make as many recommendations as possible fully completed, and we have made some progress since February when one of my colleagues arrived. In relation to the general point about delivery of savings, it's fair to say that the Directorate has a very challenging savings target for the current year, somewhere in excess of £23 million worth of savings that need to be delivered. The most significant saving relates to financial savings resulting from changes to our cohort of children looked after. As many members will know, there is a national issue in relation to the complexity of children coming into social care, and there's an increased complexity of need relating to those children. I think it's also fair to say there is relatively genuinely acknowledged that the external residential market is broken, and there is a higher level of profit that is made that finds its way into the cost base for local authorities all around the country. The Directorate continues to seek to diversify its estate by bringing forward additional small group living, which is effectively where we are constructing and taking ownership and running more of our own in-house provision. We're absolutely seeking to encourage foster carers, and members may be aware that we've increased our marketing to foster carers. We've introduced a refer a friend scheme for foster carers. We're also taking forward some policy development in terms of fostering to try to make it more attractive for as many people as possible in the city and nearby to foster. We've also got a particular focus in terms of improving the skill base of certain elements of our foster care resource so that they can foster care children with more complex needs. That then itself lends to a greater potential saving. We're also doing everything that we can to effectively get the right mix of placement. There's effectively a hierarchy of placement model that exists, trying to keep as many children as possible with family and in kinship, then moving to make sure that as many older children are in supported accommodation, and therefore then only having that sort of high cost base for external residential where it's absolutely necessary. Having said all that, it's a real challenge just because of the nature of the demand pressures that exist, and we are working through that. There's considerable oversight of those activities, both in the Directorate by CLT, by the Member Oversight Board that's chaired by Councillor Cooper as the Executive Member for Resources, and includes Councillor Hayden as the Executive Member for Children's and Families. So there's quite a lot of focus on that, but it is a challenge. I think we are just about finalising the Q1 position, and that will be reported to Executive Board at its meeting in July. That will give us the first indication of where we are in relation to the current year. Shall I pause there, because that was a relatively lengthy answer to a relatively short question.
Thank you very much. I just want to say, as a foster carer myself, I did attend an event last week where it was trying to recruit carers from other backgrounds in order to help to deal with some of the issues that we've got. I'm going to move on to Councillor Carter, who's got a question.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I suppose this is a question for Victoria, really, but on page 22 of the report, the financial challenge, which is all around, as we all know, adults and health, children, families, etc. It's a pretty stark section, full stop, using words like imperative to address the financial challenge, and now that more robust monitoring has been introduced. I could go on about that, but the question is this: what is the resilience of the departments like financially to unforeseen happenings? Is it better than it used to be? Is it a source of great concern? It is to me, I have to say. And in this increasingly peculiar world, the departments, having had the financial history they've both had now, look pretty vulnerable. What are your views on what I've just said, Victoria?
Thank you, Chair. The financial resilience of the Council this year is, as we've known, is probably the most challenging. And as part of setting the revenue budget for 25-26, we did increase the strategic contingency reserve, and we created the social care reserve, which is best practice from SITFA, to recognise that we have set a robust budget, but because of what's happening nationally, and we're not on our own, there are significant pressures in both children's and families and adults across the whole country, and it's been recognised that it is a broken system at the moment in both areas, and that's why we're awaiting the reforms that should be the Casey reforms in the autumn, but also the white paper for the reform of SEND. We do know that the number of looked after children in Leeds is reducing, but actually the number that require provision, so because of the complexity, is increasing of that cohort. We are working very closely with both directorates, as it shows in here. I attend both the Adults and Health Budget Review Group, and I chair the Task and Finish Group within Children's and Families. And I would say that we are working with a very complex cohort of the population, which is making it challenging because of the needs that they require. We are working hard across council to try and come up with those strategies around what we would do to manage the financial position, which is what Phil commented on before, all the initiatives around trying to ensure we've got enough provision in the city, trying to make sure that children receive that provision through foster carers, because we know Home First is the best thing for children. But it is difficult. There isn't enough funding in the system at the moment. It does cause me concern, especially when it's taking time to do this change, which it will do, because some of the people that we're dealing with, both children and adults, are the most vulnerable. And when we sometimes think we plan to do an action in a certain time period, it doesn't always happen because of that complexity. What I would say as a council is we're doing everything we can, and we're working very well together. But it does cause me concern, which is why we put those two reserves in, and we're managing it at the corporate leadership team. So it's on the agenda every week at corporate leadership team to discuss the financial position and what we're going to do to bring it back into balance for this year. We've obviously just had the consultation document from government on fair funding, and we're analysing that at the moment. However, it's still very high level, so it won't be until the policy statement comes out in the autumn that we'll get firmer figures. But we're hoping that the redistribution of the funding will help at Leeds to reflect some of that pressure that we're dealing with. So it is a challenging time. I think anybody in finance in a local authority would say that we're at the most challenging times it's ever been. But I think at Leeds we're in a really good place to deal with that together, because we do work very closely together. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bithell.
Thank you. I have a question on page 30 around the antisocial behaviour, and it may be a little bit too much minutiae, so if it can't be answered here, that's also fine. I'm happy for a follow-up. It talks about the targeted work to provide assurance around policies and tenancy management, and I just wondered whether we're including in that the policies around dog ownership and support dogs, because that's becoming an increasing issue with antisocial behaviour around dogs in high-rise flats. So just some assurances that that is being covered, and if it isn't, the bit where it talks about as the review progresses, can we expand potentially? Could we expand to include it? Thank you.
At the moment, I don't think it does include that, but we can ask that question and make sure that those policies are in place.
Thank you. Councillor Chesterfield.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my question related to a point that was raised just a little earlier, and that's regards to the recruitment of foster carers. And I should mention, as our chair, I'm also a foster carer with Leeds. And for some time there has been a programme of recommend a friend to become a foster carer, but that was open to approved foster carers. My understanding at the moment is that that's being opened up to the wider public, and I suppose my concern sat here is that could that be abused, or is there opportunities for that to be abused? So what safeguards are in place from the service to ensure that that recommend a friend scheme isn't abused going forward? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the refer a friend scheme effectively is a monetary reward, if you like, for the referrer. The actual process of considering suitability of potential foster carers is unchanged by that process. So all the checks and balances that are built into the existing system remain, and there is only a payment made to the referrer should that referral result in a foster carer proceeding through all the entire process that currently exists and will continue to exist as it moves into the future. So the Directorate's focus will always remain on the suitability of foster carers, and the ability for a financial reward plays no part in that decision making. It's absolutely about seeking to encourage foster carers to be referred, but then it is only paid right at the end of the process should the foster carer be deemed to be suitable and a child placed with them.
Thank you. Councillor Dowson.
Yeah, three questions. Firstly, page 29, PFI contract expiry. So they finally started to expire, and I hate to see the word risk. It always sort of gets the hairs on my back going, but it does talk about PFI contracts, significant changes, specific requirements relating to the end of contracts, and then the last word on that particular section is manage these risks. And I'm wondering if anybody can actually tell us what risks they may be to the council, and is it something, Chair, that may come to corporate governance and audit at some point? Do you want them all together, or do you want to deal with that one first?
I think if we put them all together and then the appropriate officers then can answer.
On page 39, you've got a section on third sector resilience, and we all know how important the third sector is to Leeds. Without them, we just couldn't function. And again, there's a review going on about partnership governance arrangements. So I'm wondering what that will consist of also, and how we're looking at supporting our third sector and managing the governance around them. And finally, page 43, that old chestnut that comes back often, and in view of what's been happening with some very major organisations and the inability to actually bottom out their problems leads me to wonder and ask once again, are we absolutely 100% secure that our cyber security is such that we will be robust against any attacks? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Eric?
Thank you, Councillor. I'll just come in on the PFI risks. It's an area that I'm picking up on. So yeah, with PFI expiry, obviously there's quite a few risks there. So these are quite long timescale that these contracts have been in place for. So the arrangements that need to be put in place are obviously quite significant there. So some of those risks are around kind of resourcing risks. Sorry, is that better? Resource and risk around ensuring that we have adequate resources to deliver on these projects. So when we say that PFI's the PFI expiry is starting, we've got one this year and then a bit of a kind of gap until 2030 when we then start to see a significant increase in those PFIs expiring. Much of these contracts relate to assets and the management of assets, so there's a lot of work to be done around asset condition and making sure that basically the council is getting those assets back in a fit-for-purpose status. There's then the operational risks. Obviously, these contracts cover a lot of operational arrangements that we then need to put in processes and potentially new contracts, potentially bringing those processes back in-house to kind of deliver on that. And then you've got kind of reputational risks. There is a lot of this stuff that relates to schools. So there's potential reputational risk, and then obviously the big one still sits as a financial risk, again linked to asset condition and kind of operational readiness. So the main focus of kind of our audit there is looking at the strategic approach to that and what the council, and particularly the PFI expiry team, are putting in place to kind of manage those risks and have a strategy that is kind of fit for purpose to kind of cover all of those different contracts that we've got there.
I'll just pick up the one around partnership governance. Is the microphone on me?
I wondered if you wanted me to respond on the cyber question. The question around confidence, it's always a balance, and of course it's something that we shy away from discussing in public and making bold statements about cyber. I'm happy to give one-to-one briefings to anybody who's interested. We're as confident as we can be. We take appropriate measures around cyber, but we're always balancing risk in that regard.
Okay, thank you. Victoria, it was yours about the PFI. Yeah, if you follow up with the PFI and then Councillor Dowson, did you?
I've got partnerships.
Okay, yeah. And then Councillor Dowson, if there's any follow up for PFI, and then Jonathan will pick up partnerships.
Okay, thank you, Chair. What I would add is that we have recognised the transition around when the PFI contracts do expire, and we've recognised that, and within the procurement service we've got a dedicated team who's looking at the expiry of the PFI contracts. This does take a number of years because of the number of surveys that have to be completed to make sure that the assets are transferred back fit for purpose and that we are ready for the operational side. So we have got one expiry coming up very quickly, and the team have been working on that for a couple of years now. So once that happens, then we'll do the learning from that expiry and move it into the next one. So there is a dedicated team that's resourced up to enable us to transfer them appropriately. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dowson, do you have a follow-up?
I think you've hit the nail on the head in so much as it's learning, isn't it? And if there's one and then a gap, till 2030, I suppose getting it right and learning lessons from this one will be quite interesting, because there is a raft of them coming in over the next sort of 20 years. And it is a big risk to the council, I feel. A lot of different departments will have to pick up a lot of work. So perhaps not immediately, but once the first one's gone through, it might be quite interesting to have the report back at Corporate Governance and Audit, just around the learning from that PFI chair, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you. Jonathan, do you want to pick up on partnerships?
Yeah, just picking up the question around partnership governance arrangements that we're initiating that review of. So I think important to say partnership working is recognised as quite a strength for this authority, and I think that's been recognised at peer review. I think we have strong governance arrangements in place, particularly with those significant partnerships, but it's one of those areas where you can't take your eye off the ball across the piece, and it's important to achieve that consistency. So what we're doing initially, and this has been led by Liz to my left, is a bit of a benchmarking exercise where We look at our arrangements, and we have a partnership register, a checklist in place that's expected to be completed, where we'll use that to assess the specific arrangements of each partnership, the risks presented. But we're looking at what other authorities do, how they bring that to life in best practice. So that's well established, as I say, consistently. So it's not just your big significant partnerships, but also some of the smaller ones with the less obvious risks, and how we make sure that that's fully embedded. So we're looking at that, as I say, across good practice by other authorities, other sources of best practice, and then we will take that and make some observations and recommendations around our own arrangements, and you'll see more information come through that through the likes of the annual governance statement and our other update reports. So I hope that helps.
Thank you very much. Any follow-up, Councillor Dowson?
Not on that particular one, but just on the cyber security one. Yeah, of course we don't want you to give us details. That would be absolutely stupid, and of course we wouldn't expect you to do that. What we need is a very secure voice saying, yes, as far as we are not happy, but we have everything in place that we need to have at the moment. We know that things change, and especially in the world of cybersecurity, things move so quickly. You don't know which actors are out there trying to figure out some way of bypassing or getting through our systems. But, you know, if you're happy now, we need that to be loud and clear that at this precise moment we have everything in place that we feel we need to have, and there's nothing else that we require the council or the departments within the council to provide us to be able to give that assurance at this precise moment.
Yeah, so I think from a technology controls perspective, we've got a good range of tools in place and monitoring, and we're able to identify faults and respond to them. We've got processes in place to be able to do that. Where I think where there's room for improvement potentially is around end user training and an awareness of individual responsibility around cybersecurity, which is an ongoing conversation that we have with officers across the council and members to be aware of the risks, and I think that is just an ongoing programme and of training and awareness. But your question around technologies and controls, we've got an appropriate range of tools that we've invested in. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Is that okay? Councillor Layton?
Thank you, Chair. My question is actually about procurement governance, and I'm just thinking that particularly procurement is very important in ensuring we probably realise some of our budget efficiencies or budget plan. What do we have in place in terms of governance to make sure that the contracts that we put in place, we realise the benefits that we expected to achieve when we outsource, when we buy technology, whatever it may be, through procurement? Thank you.
In relation to that, we do some procurement reviews specifically around those sorts of things. We do contract management reviews, specific contract management reviews. We're involved in particular projects. Part of that will be looking at benefits realisation. But procurement themselves bring an assurance report every year. I believe, is it to February? July. Yeah, so they'll be bringing their own assurance report in July that outlines all their governance arrangements over all those sorts of things like the procurement, how we make sure that we spend on contract, how we minimise off-contract spend, how we monitor that to look to put contracts in place where it's more appropriate to have those contracts, what training they give to officers, and on top of that they're currently implementing a new system which will help with the contract management side of things, and it's about ensuring that officers are aware of their responsibilities in terms of things like contract management. So procurement provide advice and guidance, but the contract managers should be doing the day-to-day contract management to ensure that we're getting what it is we've procured be it goods, be it services, and that those are to the required standards and the contractors are meeting their obligations and then doing any kind of learning post-contract and building that back into their new procurement exercises.
Yeah, thank you. Is there anything that is available for us to see, you know, a rolled up summary of how well that's performing? I'm just conscious that I'm pretty sure, well, certainly as a councillor, I've got several probably examples where maybe suppliers probably aren't adhering to contracts, and I'm not sure how well we're managing that as a council. I want to feel confident that we are.
I think it's a good point, and I think it's something that we'll discuss with Procurement and Commercial Services, so you get those assurances through on the arrangements to deliver that in their specific assurance report that they bring to committee there. So I think they will be able to probably give you some of the detail on exactly what those contract management arrangements are that will inform further discussion around that with their assurance report.
Sorry, who do I need to speak to?
We'll do that for you.
Great.
Yes. So we'll flag that point with them in the drafting of their report, so that your points are fully addressed in that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Councillor Carter.
Yes, thank you, Chair. If I could go on to page 34 and 35, which is on grants, that certain reviews have been undertaken in the past period, and a whole list of grants are down here for looking at. I don't anywhere see here arts grants, and as the Director of Finance knows, Director of Resources, it's something that's been causing me some attention over the past couple of years. And you know, you're talking about £5 or £6 million worth of grants, which appear not to have been authorised by councillors. I tried an FOI to get to the bottom of the spoken council on it. I don't see arts grants mentioned here. Are they going to be looked at to check for transparency and proper political engagement?
Okay, thank you for that question. Angela?
In relation to the grants that we've listed there, those are the ones where we're specifically required to either provide our own signature that those terms and conditions of the grant have been met, or we are doing additional work to provide Victoria with the assurances she needs to sign off various statements, for example, to West Yorkshire Pension Fund around our sorry, I've lost the word. When we contribute our contributions to the West Yorkshire Pension Fund. In terms of art councils, we have done some art council grants, but they were included in our previous report. So it is probably that could be that they're in that report. If you've got a specific concern over a specific one, if you let us know, and we can tell you whether we've specifically looked at it.
It would be helpful to see the previous report. Obviously, I haven't seen that.
No, that's fine. I think we can just email it across to you. That'll be okay. Any further questions? Councillor Bithell? Oh, sorry. Linda,
Thank you. Just a quick one on the recommendation tracking. There's a lot of information in here about them, and that's really great. And I remember in previous years we asked for this level of detail, so I'm really pleased it's now in there. In terms of the detail around those that are more than 6 months overdue, the detail is there as to why, but not how worried we are about the risk of them not being done by now. So I'd be interested to know whether, although that work's ongoing, and we're clear that the directorates are bought in and are working hard on it, what risk does that pose to the council by them not being done? And then in terms of the open recommendations versus the ones that have been closed between February and June, I wondered how many of the ones that have been closed are ones that weren't required. Do we get directorates, the easy ones, just kind of ticking off pretty quickly, so it looks like we're doing lots of the recommendations straight away, but actually the harder ones are being kept and they're the ones that are being delayed, and therefore we're likely to see further delays and difficulties moving on? Thank you.
In terms of the two recommendations that remain outstanding, I think in both instances they're quite large recommendations and they've done a significant amount of work. So the pieces that are still left, so for example, the cybersecurity, it links to what David said about increasing staff awareness around security. So in terms of the risks around that, we're not concerned. Because I think the key things have been done around the risk and articulating our risk appetite in relation to that. And in relation to the second recommendation around purchasing cards, again, they are there's work ongoing with that, but part of that is about getting the suppliers to sign up. So I think they are working as hard as they can on that. But you need the third party to agree to do that. So they are on with both of those. In terms of easy recommendations, I don't think we give easy recommendations. I'm sure Phil would agree with that. What we try to do is give realistic timescales for those recommendations, because we do recognise that things take time. There are things that are complex and difficult and will need time to think about. So we give those more time. What I would say is that also we are aware that things change. There are recommendations where people will think that they can get it done in that time, and then they do some more investigative work and realise that it's not as simple as first thought. So we do have discussions with the recommendation owners, and we will, if we believe it's necessary, we will move the implementation date to allow for more time. But those conversations are had with the recommendation owners and are only given in exceptional circumstances. In terms of a breakdown of the recommendations that have been closed, if you let us know exactly what you want, we'll provide that for you.
Just to build on the assurance that Angela's given there as well, and I would endorse that we tend not to give easy recommendations, but we do have a sliding scale when it comes to significance of the impact on the control environment. So the recommendation tracking process covers the high and the medium priority recommendations, the more impactful ones, where we'll make more what I describe as, say, incremental recommendations, where it might be an easier job of closing a loop in a particular area. Those aren't subject to tracking, so we do focus on the most important ones. We will still agree target dates on the lower priority ones, but we focus particularly on the most impactful recommendations.
So just so I'm clear, when we talk about the way we put them either medium or high, we're talking about the impact and prioritising based on that. So it's not prioritised based on the risk to the council, it's prioritised based on the impact to the council, and therefore on what basis is that impact, or could the impact be that it closes the risk, or is it a financial impact we're looking at? Like, what is the purpose of it?
I think the two are very closely interlinked there. So I use the word impact. I could just as easily have used the word risk. It is around the significance of risk that we've observed. So that recommendation then will have, by definition, really a significant impact in closing off that risk. It's a judgment there, really. But if it is the case that there was a very small weakness and it's just a case of ticking a certain box to get that process on a lower priority recommendation, those don't tend to go into the tracking process. and we focus on the bigger items to close off significant risk areas.
Thank you very much. Linda?
You'll be pleased to know just one question from me today, because there have been loads of great questions today, so just one from me. The paragraph 5.4 around I think it's 5.4, yeah, developing the risk appetite statements for the corporate risks. Great to hear that that's being considered, and great to see that internal audit are going to consider that in their planning. I guess for me and this committee, will those risk appetite statements in one way, shape or form be presented to this committee? Will we see to try and understand what the council's appetite is in respect of those risks, which will potentially help us as a committee determine the level of assurance that we want to see or hear in respect of those? And if you're, as an internal audit function, are considering them for planning purposes, will you also consider risk appetite in the work that you do? So, for example, if you know that you're at a distance from appetite on a particular risk, but it's an area that you want to cover in your plan, will that then become an audit of an action plan to get to appetite, rather than an audit of controls where we know that they're not already in operation? Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. In terms of bringing that information back to committee, the task and finish group that we referenced there, that will look at risk appetite and then how we record risk assurance, that's being led obviously by intelligence and policy with our input, and then the outputs of that information will come back to committee within that risk management assurance report that will come to committee later in the year. I think for us, this will be extremely valuable intelligence in the round for our audit planning process, so more systematic mapping of where the second and third line assurances are that we've talked about many times in the past, as well as risk appetite. So yes, that will inform our audit planning process. Once we've got the clear idea of what that looks like, we'll then again bring you that clearer information on how that impacts on our audit planning process in the subsequent updates to committee, if that helps.
Thank you very much. So we're going to move on to the next agenda item, but before we do so, are we happy with the recommendations and the additional requests that have been made in the report? Yeah, we're going to move on, but thank you very much. Item agenda 9, it's counter fraud and corruption with Jonathan and Julia.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the biannual counter fraud update report. So the report itself, returning members will be familiar with the format of it and the information that's provided in there. So we start there by summarising the referrals that we've received through the multiple channels. We received 15 referrals during this period. Increasing complexity amongst some of them, and a standard practice for us, we don't comment on individual cases that are ongoing, but there's lots of work that's ongoing from ourselves there. 2.6, we then run through a summary on investigations that we've closed during the period, so you can see the table there that gives a summary by area and type of what we've closed during the period. As we say, where appropriate through the investigation work that we undertake, recommendations are made and those are tracked through the activity that's reported through the previous update report that Angela presented, the internal audit update report. So that kind of brings together the reactive work that we do to respond to concerns. The report also summarises the various proactive work that we're undertaking. So first of all, I think we outline the activity through the National Fraud Initiative data matching exercise, which is ongoing at the moment. Then in terms of awareness raising and the promotion of policies, we've mentioned that we shared a promotional item refreshing everybody on the policy framework back in November for International Fraud Awareness Week, so that shared good practices there. And I think it's significant to mention to the committee that today is World Whistleblower Day. So there's an item that's gone out across the council on Insight, endorsed by the chair, again providing an update on our whistleblowing channels, recognising the importance of that day. We summarise the outcomes of some of the reviews that have been undertaken during the period, as stated, where there are potential weaknesses in the control environment there. We do make those recommendations, and this is where we rely on strong constructive working relationships that we have across council departments to make sure that there are improvements to the control environment. We guide the committee through a summary of activities in other areas of the council with counter-fraud responsibility. So there's information on housing, there's information on other areas and how well established those arrangements are. So there's some important information there. We've also drawn attention to the incoming new offence, failure to prevent fraud under the Economic Crime and Transparency Act that's coming in later this year. So the aim of that offence is to make it easier to hold organisations to account and criminally liable where certain conditions apply. So one of the main defences there involves having reasonable fraud prevention procedures which incorporate fraud risk assessment and management. We've talked about obviously the importance of having a well-established policy framework there. Also increasingly important to ensure that robust fraud risk assessment is undertaken across the organisation. We do recognise that risk at directorate level within the organisation, so there is oversight there, and we are working with the leadership team on communications around the introduction to that Act to make sure that those fraud risk assessments are robustly undertaken and refreshed, and that there is appropriate monitoring of the actions coming out of that, which is again an important factor in directing the focus of our work during the year. And finally, important to note that we're well on the way with a review of our whistleblowing policy at the moment. So obviously that regular policy refresh is really important, even where there haven't been changes to legislation, which there haven't in this instance. It is important that we review and reflect on our policy. So we've been undergoing consultation recently with the trade unions. We will share the policy with the chair and also bring that policy back to committee once it's been approved, so that committee can have full sight of that later in the year. So that work is very much ongoing at the moment, and we're well on the way with that. So that concludes the presentation of the main elements of the report, and I'm happy to take questions where appropriate.
Councillor Bithell.
Thank you. Mine isn't actually a question. It's just a comment, I suppose, if that's okay, Chair. I just wanted to point out on the papers the fact that that you're getting referrals through the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian, and also the where is it? Which page was it on? And the fact that we're managing to get houses back when housing fraud is going on, tenancy fraud is going on. I just wanted it sort of noted just how good those two things are and what positive steps they are. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Gavani.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in paragraph 3.10, it says about the school's fraud awareness training, and 83 people have attended, either school staff or governors. That doesn't seem very many considering the number of schools. I would have thought there should have been somebody from at least every school dealing with that.
I think I'm right in saying that when we initially started to roll this out across schools, because it has to use slightly different software, unfortunately, because schools have different arrangements there, we weren't recording at that point completion rates. So there will be officers that have completed that in schools that unfortunately weren't captured at the point that we brought in those recording arrangements. We continue to promote that, and at the moment, Julia and I, one of our main priorities is to completely review and revamp the fraud awareness training en masse, which will cover both the local authority element and the schools element. Now that we have a mechanism for capturing that, we'll be able to give more, robust figures there that will give you that assurance on completion in schools. But it was heavily promoted across those areas, including Leeds for Learning, etc., before we were able to capture that.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions? Councillor Chesterfield.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a general question, really. On page 66, 2.2, the table which comprised the number of referrals. 2020 to 2021 was 74, and there's been like a downward sort of trend. Was that high number of referrals due to anything particular, COVID, for instance, or?
I think you've answered the question yourself there. I think there's a high number of referrals that came through around that time, around the COVID business grants. But we also have referenced in there that we've tried to ensure the correct focus of our arrangements for receiving concerns, so that the ones that come through to us from an internal audit perspective are particularly the ones where there are significant risks around the likes of fraud and corruption. So nowadays, if we receive referrals where there are other processes in place to deal with that, whether that be a complaints policy around specific requests for service, whether it be HR-related grievances and employment type issues where it's not necessarily a fraud and corruption issue, we're much better at triaging those at source than we were in the past. So that does explain some of the downward trend in the numbers, and particularly that first year that you mentioned, I think was at quite a spike due to the COVID arrangements at that time.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions? Yep.
Just a bit of a selfish one from me. I don't know if I've got access to your anti-fraud policy because I don't have access to your intranet, but it would be really helpful if I could have a look through that, if you could share it with me, please. Thank you.
Yeah, as I say, there's a whole policy framework there that covers whistleblowing, it covers anti-bribery, anti-money laundering, and then a more general type policy. We're happy to share those with you and members of the committee on that.
Thank you very much. Are we happy with the recommendations set out in the report and the sharing of the policy amongst members? Thank you very much. So we're going to move on to item agenda 10, which is the receipt of the audit plan for Grant Thornton. Mary?
Thank you, Chair. So the covering report presents Grant Thornton's audit plan for the 24-25 year, so I'll hand straight over to Perminda from Grant Thornton to present it.
Thank you, Mary. So you have our audit plan for 24-25 in front of you. I'm just looking on page 95 of the pack, or page 13 of the audit plan, which is the introduction and headlines. The audit plan, as in previous years, is risk-based, so we focus our work on what we consider to be the significant risks at the authority. Obviously recognising some of the financial pressures that the authority is facing, which have been significant over recent years, and of course the good work that the Finance Department have done over the last probably 18 to 24 months to get the accounts audit back on a straight edge, which is very commendable. The significant risks that we've identified are set out on page 97 onwards. There are two risks that all auditors are required to consider as part of their work. One is around the management override of controls, and that's where management may manipulate the year-end outturn position to suit the organisation's purposes or where they would like to be, and that's a risk that all auditors are required to consider, and we cannot rebut that one. The second area that all auditors are required to consider is around revenue recognition and also expenditure transactions. We've looked at the Council's arrangements around that, the controls that it has in place, and we've rebutted those risks. So that's not a significant risk that we'll be focusing on. But that's not to say we don't undertake any work on income or expenditure. We undertake quite a lot of work. It's just that we don't classify that as a significant risk and have a particular focus in a particular area. Just over the page on to page 17 of the plan, or page 99 of the pack, the two significant risks that we focus on at Leeds are around the valuation of land and buildings, including council dwellings. And the reason for that is it's a significant figure in your financial statements. It was around 6.5 billion last year. And then the second area is around the valuation of the pension fund net balance. Again, a significant estimate made by management, which goes into your account. And last year, it was 208 million shown as an asset overall. Just over the page onto page 101 of the pack, or page 19 of the plan, We've also identified another additional risk this year. It's not a significant risk, it's classified as another risk, and that relates to the implementation of IFRS 16, which was brought in from April 2024, and it applies to all local authorities for the first time. So we'll be looking at the arrangements the authority has for accounting for leases and whether that standard has been appropriately dealt with and accounted for in your draft financial statements. Our materiality is set out on page 105 or 23 of the pack. And just a couple of other things just want to draw to your attention. Value for money is set out on page 117, I beg your pardon, and page 35 of the report. Obviously, in addition to auditing the accounts, we also review the arrangements that the Council has in place for ensuring economy, efficiency and effectiveness in its use of resources. We are required to consider three areas: financial sustainability, governance and improving the 3 E's. And we've identified some significant weaknesses in terms of the areas that we will focus on. Those are technical terms that we are required to use where we believe there are significant issues that may impact on the operations of the Council, and they're set out on that slide. The logistics and timetable for the audit are set out on page 119 and 37 of the audit plan. Our fees are set out on page 122. They are in principle determined by public sector audit appointments with variations for any additional work which is set out on that slide. I think that's all I wanted to say, but I'll pause there and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Councillor Bithell?
Thank you. When I was on this committee before, there was the potential issue of a part of the budget, and I'm sorry I can't be more detailed in my memory. There was a part of the budget where it didn't currently count as part of the council budget, but there was talk that it would start counting, and it was going to be a real issue, and I just wonder where we're up to on that and whether that's gone.
It's the dedicated schools grant that you're talking about. That is the statutory override has been extended for 2 years, which came out in the consultation on Friday. So it is a risk for the council, and at the moment there's a budget, a management action plan being developed, which will go to executive board on the actions that need to be taken to bring that in place. The reason the statutory override has been extended for 2 years is that there is a reform to be undertaken, and there'll be a white paper in the autumn which will detail what that reform is, but they say it will be taking 2 years to undertake that reform. But we do know that the dedicated schools grant is around the SEND, so it's those children that receive the education, health and care plans and the knock-on impact of that. And we've seen it's another national issue that everybody's grappling with. So that's what it would have been that you were referring to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Pamina, did you want to come in?
I was just going to add to that as part of the value for money work, we do look at DSG. Obviously, the impact of DSG at Leeds hasn't been as significant as other authorities, but it is now starting to creep up and become a lot bigger. So we will have a look at what the council is doing in that regard.
Thank you. Councillor Carter.
Yeah, to go right back to the beginning, the first significant risk you identified, valuation of land and buildings, including council dwellings. Question number one, are you happy that we even know where all our assets are? And number two, if there is an overvaluation, we're talking about a significant amount of money here, £6.5 billion. What effect does that have on the council's balance sheet?
That's a very interesting question. The numbers involved are very large indeed. We can only audit the systems that the council has in place to record their assets. and we look at all additions, disposals and transfers during the year, and we undertake testing around that, and we've not identified any significant differences in that regard. As regards your question around does it capture everything? Well, of course, as far as we're aware, we can only check what's recorded, and if there are parcels of land that are unused, and you do hear about these across the country occasionally, that somebody wants to buy or develop and it becomes apparent it belongs to an authority, well, that might be the case, but we have not come across anything of that nature. The value on the balance sheet is very significant, but unlike a company, a local authority is quite different. You don't routinely go and buy and sell your assets. Your council dwellings are generally to provide social housing for tenants. Your other buildings are used for offices or for civic purposes. So whilst it might be a more significant issue in a company, there is a slight difference and a nuance for a local authority. Any differences we identify, of course, we do discuss with management, and in the past they have generally accepted any recommendations we make to make any changes. So in that regard, we don't have any concerns at this moment, but I don't know whether Victoria wants to say anything further.
I think the only thing I would add on that is that if there is a difference in evaluation, that it is an accounting entry and it doesn't affect the council tax. So it is shown on the balance sheet, but then it's quite complex. It goes into the income and expenditure account, but it's reversed out before it hits the impact of the resources available for the local authority, so council taxpayers. So therefore, it is an accounting entry that we would do through the revaluation reserve. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to go back to the accuracy of what we actually own, and have you any comment on that then, Victoria? I mean, I entirely accept the Grant Thornton explanation. They can only use the information you give them. How satisfied you that the information you give them is accurate?
I mean, we have quite robust systems in place. We do a lot of check and balances. We're talking to the directorates all the time. So I think I can provide this committee with the assurance that we've done everything we can do to identify the assets that the council holds. Okay, don't know, Mary? No? Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there any further questions? Nope. Okay, thank you. So we're happy with the recommendations in the report and the assurances about the question that Councillor Carter has given. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Going to move on to item agenda 11, the annual draft report, Liz.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the draft report of the work the committee did in the previous year, 24-25, which is scheduled for presentation at full council in August this year. So the report details how the committee has discharged its responsibility for governance in the previous year, and includes key information regarding how we've been able to demonstrate our conformance with best practice guidance as detailed by the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, known as CIPFA, in their 2022 guidance. Appendixed at the end of the report. Thank you. I don't know what the plural is for that. At the end of the report are details of the work that was received by the committee in 24-25. Also includes the outcomes of the CIPFA self-assessments that committee members did in November 24. And I have benchmarked our results against our other local authorities, and we are in the middle ground regarding our scores. So there's work to do, but we are comparative to our other local authorities. I've also included the matters that were included as matters arising in the previous year as well, also emphasising the work that the committee has done to strengthen the council's governance and internal control frameworks. Just inviting committee members, if there is anything that they think is missing from the report that could be added, and then to seek your approval for the presentation of the report to full council on the 29th of August. So happy to take any questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? No? Okay, we're going to move on back onto you, Liz, again.
Back again. So this is the presentation of the work programme and member development plan for this coming year, 25-26. So there are, in the work programme, there are the regular standing items that have been highlighted by committee to receive during the year. Following the approval of the committee meeting in March 25, there's been the addition of a health and safety annual assurance report that is scheduled for September. So the work within the programme satisfies the requirements of the committee within our terms of reference, but the programme is not set, so it can be adapted to include items of assurance if members feel there is something missing within the committee's scope and terms of reference. So the member development plan follows the best practice guidance as CIPFA have laid out in their committee guidance 2022. It also considers the feedback that I received from members from the self-assessment done in November 24. And the development plan will be presented at each committee meeting so that we can monitor the progress. And it's important that members try and attend that training where possible, so that we can make sure that you have as much knowledge and guidance through the assurance reports that are received during the year. So as with the work programme, the member development plan is flexible and adaptable, so if members feel that there is additional knowledge or coverage that is required, please either let myself or the chair know and we can include that in the members development plan. But again, happy to take any comments or questions. Thank you.
Any questions? Councillor Dowson?
Two from me, and that is, we've discussed the PFI work, and obviously we don't know yet when that's going to be completed, and we're going to have the learning from it, but I would like it to be down here at some point, but that will be an item coming up. And the second thing was on training, and I must admit I found it really useful. I think sometimes on committees like this, actually curiosity and an interest overshadows, because asking those questions perhaps that a trained person might not or know the answer to, but actually teases out other things is quite useful. But I did find the training quite useful. Is there any element of this that's actually compulsory? Because I do think that some of it was so important it should be compulsory. I'm quite happy if it isn't, but I mean, is there any thoughts on that, Chair?
So regarding the comment regarding the PFI report in the work programme, the conversation is underway with colleagues in PACS to find a timescale as to when that can be included, but it is on my radar. Member development plan. CIPFA guidance doesn't say that it is compulsory, but there is a requirement for members to ensure that they have the required knowledge to be able to execute their duties efficiently. So very much the top half of the member development plan is what CIPFA and as a committee we would say are towards essential, but without compulsory making you attend, but they are the areas that cover all the reports that will be received during committee, so it is very much encouraged that attendance is met for those. And the bits at the end, the IDS and the information governance, they are really useful as not just members of the committee but as councillors as well, to keep yourselves informed in those areas. I have developed an MS team for committee members, so I'm hoping to build sort of a training information library as we go along to keep all that information in one place. Thank you.
Thank you very much. But it's also in our councillor contracts as well that we are highly recommended to attend training, and especially when we sit on boards like Corporate Governance and Audit Committee with the recommendation from CIPFA as well. Are there any further questions? Linda?
Just a comment really, as I discussed earlier. Unfortunately, I won't be able to make the next meeting in July, but should papers be ready before I go on holiday, I am more than happy to review them and send any questions in advance if that's okay.
That would be very much appreciated. Thank you very much, Linda. So moving on to that next, that Linda's nicely brought up, our next meeting is on Monday, the 28th of July at 10:30. I would like to say thank you to everyone that's attended today, and we'll see you next month. Thank you. Bye-bye.